Hello and welcome back, or indeed welcome for the first time to Inclusive Design 2021. It's good to see you all tuning in. My name is Hanny Swan. I'm based in Brighton in the UK. And so far we've been following the sun as it travels across the world with speakers from Australia, from Japan, from Finland and the UK. ID24 is brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Intopia, Fable, Arc and Adobe, as well as our Gold supporter, Tetralogical. You can follow us on Twitter at ID24conf, with the 24 as numbers, conf, C-O-N-F. And if you have questions for our presenter at the end of the session, please do tweet them using the hashtag ID24 so that we can learn more about what he's got to share with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my co-host, Kevin Mar-Molinaro, who will be introducing Paul.
Hi there, my name is Kevin Mar-Molinaro. I'm currently sat in London in the UK, and I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Paul Alexander. Paul is a personal friend of mine and ex-colleague at Kin + Carta. He's now working for XDesign, a hugely knowledgeable and brilliant person. So he's going to be talking today on giving voices equity and how you can build inclusive teams and create inclusive products. Sorry, how inclusive teams create inclusive products. My apologies, Paul.
Well, thank you very much for that, Kevin. You make me blush. So as Kevin was saying there, the title of this talk today is Giving Voices Equity. Inclusive teams create inclusive products. So first of all, for those of you who maybe have some visual impairments and things like that, just a little bit of a description. I'm a male in his mid-30s with short dark hair, wearing a black jumper with some round rimmed blue sort of tortoiseshell glasses, with the world's patchiest facial hair as well. In my background, I just have a cream wall with a couple of pictures and some bookcases. So as Kev mentioned earlier, I'm Paul. I'm the QA manager at XDesign. So I look after the QA team and just sort of general quality practice within the company and within the business. Previously worked with Kevin at Kin + Carta, where I did a very similar role, working across sort of different locations. Today I am at home. I'm in Penicuik, which is just south of Edinburgh. And it was very blustery outside, but now it's looking like it's going to brighten up. So happy days. So let's get into it. Let's look at why we're here, why are we having this conversation. So in the description of the talk that I put forward, I state that inclusion is at the heart of all great design. We have a responsibility to create and build inclusive and accessible products. Within our team, we share this responsibility, but let's be frank about it. Can we genuinely expect to design inclusive products without providing an equity of voice? Now, what I mean by an equity of voice is where everybody is heard, everybody is listened to, and that we are working collaboratively together. There should be, everybody has their specialities, but there should be a level of collaboration that allows us to all be able to feel like we've been heard and to feel like that our thoughts are being considered when we're looking at this. So in this talk, we're going to look and try and discuss how the foundations of inclusion start from within. So we can utilize inclusive principles and try and use some tools to unlock varied insights that we might potentially traditionally miss out on. At the moment, many people are talking about inclusive design and accessibility. It's happening more and more, which is absolutely brilliant. Absolutely delighted that it's a topic that's coming to the forefront. More and more companies are also hiring people in specialist roles to try and deal with the gaps in their own offerings. Again, there'll be many in our communities that have been crying out for this for years, and companies that are striving for this sort of innate diversity by hiring a wide range of people from differing backgrounds in an attempt to redress the imbalances. It should be applauded, very much so. One of the biggest hurdles, though, is actually taking people along for the ride. That journey of how do we go from talking about these things and there being essentially buzzwords to actually bringing that into our culture. Because if the culture is not right, then we can't drive these things forward. And I don't think that having people in these roles necessarily will bleed that into your culture. But that's what we're going to try and talk about today, is how do we then breed that culture to support what we're talking about. So as leaders in sort of technology, we can have the problem where we become directional instead of collaborative. It happens by accident. We slip into it. People will see a voice of authority, or they'll see somebody as a specialist or as an expert, and they'll rely on people to provide them with steer. And that is where we have the problem, because we want to collaborate, we want to talk to each other rather than being sort of directional. So to be truly inclusive, we have to contribute, we have to collaborate. And in this scenario, despite applying inclusive principles, are we truly being inclusive if we don't have that equity of voice? It's kind of similar to the sort of criticism people have of AI. AI is only as good, is only as unbiased as the person who coded it or the data that you feed it. That's much debated, but it sort of relays back into human interactions. So the same could be said about our products. If we don't collaborate and we rely on a single source for steer, no matter how well intentioned, we'll easily become victims of the unconscious bias that we're trying so hard to avoid. So my stance on this is, to build inclusive products, we have to foster inclusion and diversity within our teams and communities. We need people to feel empowered to speak their mind and feel that their opinion has equal footing with anyone else in the team. Also, to be clear, by speak their mind, I don't necessarily mean just verbal communication. There are various ways to articulate your perspective. With the current pandemic, we've been forced to rethink and be creative about finding ways to work with each other. And in the day-to-day, we're working remotely, we're being challenged, we're finding new tools, we're looking at new vehicles to carry out project tasks collaboratively. And some of these approaches have actually helped some of the less forthcoming of us to participate more fully. As I said earlier, participation is key to gaining this sort of new and more rounded insights. And previously, where everything had to be in a room and there's lots of people talking, there's certain people that might not participate as much as they would like. We've actually got an opportunity here to tap into new insights by using new tools and with remote working. So I'm also going to sort of clarify something here, that not every idea will be gold. We know that, but people need to be provided the opportunity to be heard and to be understood. And as leaders within this setting, we need to be promoting and actively reinforcing these principles. If we don't do that, then we're going to end up with this sort of directive culture again. So, as I said earlier, I'm the QA manager at XDesign, and over the years, I've had to defend the honor of QA across the board. It's traditionally, and I would say, a criminally underrated profession, in my humble opinion. But I've often said that an uninformed viewpoint can directly or indirectly provide clarity on things. So to use myself as an example, I am not able to build an API. I'm not going to get stuck into the code. Conversely, I can't design a slick user experience that's going to be flashy and nice in the eye that's going to dazzle a client. But as part of my role, I do have a good eye for detail. I've got a logical way of thinking. And when you talk about the technical side of things or the design side of things, I don't have a bias. So we've all got these inherent biases based on what we've learned, what we've practiced, what we've done. And if you have that sort of uninformed standpoint, you can provide something to the conversation. Realistically, it could be said of any role. There are a lot of people talk about shifting left, which I'm a big advocate for, and getting involved early does provide a lot of value. But the teams across the board need to feel empowered to participate and not work in a silo. Shift left only works if people are actively going to get involved in it. So a lot of the things we'll talk about, they are completely subjective. There is no one size fits all fix for these things. You do need to maintain an open mind when you go into a task like this, and not be scared to change your approach. We should always be looking to reflect on what we've done, work with the successes, work with the things that need to be improved, and take things forward. Don't be scared to change things. So the main focus of this will be around what's known as acquired diversity. And so that's where your existing staff are free to voice their views, suggest out-of-the-box solutions. Some things might be slightly unorthodox, but it's getting different perspectives. We'll touch on innate diversity, but that'll be as part of the recruitment side of what I'm going to talk about. So within the engineering team at XDesign, we talk about three distinct groups. We talk about line management, we talk about a practice community, and we talk about our project teams. Within that, these are all interlinked, but these are all groups that you can have varying levels of empowerment. So we'll start with line management. So this is for me a one-to-one relationship that's completely built on trust. I see this more as a pastoral sort of nurturing role as a manager, as opposed to necessarily being a mentor. Now, you can be a mentor as well. I'm not saying that that's not part of the job, but I feel like that's the most important thing in a line manager, is having someone you can trust and somebody that you can speak to openly. So this is where we've got to create a safe space. We've got to build confidence. This is the key about being open and honest. And we also need to make sure that we're providing consistent and quality feedback. People like to know when they're doing well. Conversely, they also like to know when they've got something they need to work on. If something jumps out and bites them at an annual review, they're not going to be happy about it. So it's about making sure that you have that consistent sort of touch points. But sometimes it can be difficult to foster trust. There can be a sort of a slight sort of standoff, and there may be points where you need to show a little bit of vulnerability. Don't be scared of showing a little bit of vulnerability. None of us are perfect. Let's be perfectly frank. And it's these imperfections where we find our common ground. People will most likely bond over these things than they would do over necessarily successes. But you do have to strike that balance on that, though. You can't overshare. The staff have to trust you, but they also have to have confidence in the fact that you know what you're doing. So it's a very thin line to tread, but what I would say is it is something that has worked for me in the past. Within that, we're talking about it being a one-to-one relationship, but having regular one-to-one meetings is essential. I know that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but set it up as their time, and their time is sacred. It's not your meeting, it's theirs. So they should be driving the discussion. You probably want to use a lot of open questions. So you might want to open up with what's on your mind. Let them land on the topic that's most important to them. It could be that they go straight in with the thing that's most important. I tend to find that what you'll do is you'll get maybe one or two bits of fluff, and then you'll get the thing that's genuinely on their mind after that. So continue those open questions though. Ask them why they feel that way or what has led to that. Give praise where necessary or where required. But also a key one that I in the past have been quite bad for, but I'm trying my very best to improve on, is respecting silence. You would be so surprised at the amount of insight you can get from somebody if you just let it hang in the air. They're still in control of the conversation. All you've done is you've just waited to let them think, and they will either start shaping their opinion and verbalize it as basically thinking out loud, which allows you to get insight into how they think, or they will just start talking, and then you have to try and guide the conversation. But you get my point. You need to respect that silence and let them choose when they want to speak. If you jump in and start closing off the question, sending the conversation down different routes, that puts you in the driver's seat, and that then takes away that empowerment from your line report. And a key question I also like to ask is it gets called the AWE question, and that's AWE, and it stands for "and what else?" It is so simple, but if you ask it at the right time, it can be incredibly effective. You need to if you ask that question and somebody is genuinely finished, they'll tell you that. But what I've tended to find with this is that you will get more out of a person. They will go that next step. They will share more. There will be that level of trust, because you are showing an interest in what they have to say, and they will reciprocate. Hopefully, anyway. So one of the other things I like to make sure that we do with one-to-ones as well is that talking about investing time in them, is to go and get regular feedback, speak to people on the project, speak to people in your community, get some fresh feedback. You know, I heard you did a great job on this. Well done. Sounds like you turned that around into something really good. Or I hear this week was challenging. Tell me about it. Again, opening things up. When you need to know more about something, open it up. Don't direct them, don't turn around and say, oh, I hear this didn't go well. Was it because of this, or was it? Just open it up to them, let them talk. And if there is something that's needing to improve, make sure you offer support, but don't necessarily jump in with a solution. Solutions are not always wanted. Sometimes people just want to get it off their chest, and you can ask them if they want help finding a solution, or you can ask them again. An open question to ask would be, and how can I support you on this? Or do you need any support on this? And then they can think about how they want to handle the situation and where they want you to help. As I say, we're not always looking for answers. Sometimes we just need to be heard. And again, that can be a very empowering experience itself. The next part that I would sort of talk about that goes along with the line management side of things, and I've just realized I didn't move forward in my slides, is personal development goals and objectives. So I mentioned earlier on about PDPs. That can sometimes people just pay lip service to that, if we're being perfectly honest. It's something that's a nice to have. We'll set them up. They might get followed, they might not. For me, these are a key indicator of you investing in your staff. While you can help them shape their goals, ultimately they will nominate them. So you want them to drive this as well. And I've used the word empower quite a lot. It's the theme that will go through here, but get them to drive and direct their own development. You give them control of that direction. Invest time in shaping and supporting them, obviously, to help them reach those targets, but ultimately they're going to be accountable for this. We need to set people up for success as well. So make sure that when they're putting things forward, that yes, they're challenging, but they're also realistic. It may be that you need to discuss whether that goal is just a bit too much of a stretch. Do we need to break that down into smaller chunks? Do we need to manufacture increments that'll give us that success? And that's where your experience comes in. They are driving the direction of travel, but you're just helping them get there. I tend to favor using the SMART objectives sort of framework, but other options are available. But just make sure that things are clear, things are understandable, they're realistic, and that you have regular check-ins, and it's time bound. You're providing the right amount of support for people. Now, I mentioned earlier on about recruitment, and we talked about how you can get two different types of diversity, whether it be from within, where you've got your inclusion and diversity around opinions of your existing staff and make sure people are heard, empowering them. This is what we've got here. Another side of it is when you're recruiting, trying to look at how we approach these things. So recently we've been expanding quite rapidly. So I've been knee deep in recruitment lately. So it's been something that's been quite at the forefront of my mind. And what I would say is that this is probably a talk within itself, inclusive recruitment, but I will try and keep to the point and keep brief. But with things like the fast expansion I'm talking about there's a few things that we need to consider. So let's start at the beginning. Are we hiring at the right level? We see a gap, and are we potentially jumping in and saying, right, well, I need a senior, so I'm going to hire a senior? Should we be reflecting, taking a moment and looking at our internal team? Is there a potential candidate for promotion and we should be hiring at a lower level? I'm a massive believer in creating a clear pathway of progression. And sometimes you do just need to make those hires, and that's fine. That's the reality of the situation. But what you need to make sure is that you're not missing somebody out. You need to make sure that you're not creating a glass ceiling, and that you're looking at all of these things. When you are looking to start the process of going out to the market, we need to look at how we approach job descriptions. Each business has its own culture and identity. There's that thing that makes that company who they are. And for example, we've all got different ways to describe roles in businesses. You might decide that everybody's an associate. You might say that you're a colleague, an ally, a co-equal, a compatriot, a comrade, whatever it is that you're going to go for, whatever you've decided to brand up, that is what you call each other internally. But when you're writing job specs, think about how that looks to an external audience. One of the most important things, and this is, if anything, throughout this entire talk, the one thing that I would say that is the most important thing is about creating a sense of belonging. If people belong, then they're invested, and they will be more proactive, and they will work more effectively. Now, you want your potential new hires to have that sense of belonging. You want them to understand what that job is. Let's not alienate people before we even start. So make sure when you're putting out things for the job ads and the descriptions of the roles, maybe even the titles, that they are things that are translatable, things that people can understand. So the next stage we look at is around things like CVs. And when we're doing that sift, we've all got our own biases. We've got lived experiences that shape the world we are in, and the people that we have around us help shape that too. And one way to try and sort of circumnavigate that bias is to anonymize CVs. If you look at a CV, realistically, does their name matter? Does the school or university they went to, does it matter? Does their date of birth matter? Their marital status? I personally couldn't, it's nice to know, and it's nice for conversation, but the reality is you don't need to know these things at a CV sift. Even to an extent, location. At the moment, we're all working a bit more remotely. We're all working further afield. What I would say is that, if it is location dependent, that should be sifted out before it gets to you. So let's look at the content of the CVs. What is actually going to add value to the shortlisting, right? Let's look at that, and let's try and get away from the biases to be more inclusive. We won't be try and get rid of exclusions. But what I would also suggest is, before you review a CV, set clear criteria of what you're going to assess candidates against. Make sure you have a clear set of criteria to put the CV through its rigor, and where possible, try and carry that shortlisting out in pairs. You will, as we've said there, we've got our biases, we're trying to combat them, but if you have somebody that will work with you in a pair, you've got somebody who will challenge your perception. There'll be somebody that will help you stick to keeping to the criteria, and vice versa, you'll do the same for that person. Once you've got your shortlist, let's consider what an interview looks like. For a technical role, it could be that you want to set a task and then have a walkthrough to discuss the approach. Our design manager at XDesign favours an audition. So that's where they will work as part of a team to come up with a design or a solution to a problem. And the team that they'll be working in will comprise of the candidate and existing staff. So this doesn't just allow them to showcase their ability, it also acts as a chemistry session. A big thing about, as I was saying earlier on, about belonging is it's not just about whether you think that candidate is the right fit. That candidate has to think that you're the right fit for them as well. And I think that, changing up the way you do things and taking on things like that can be fantastic at selling the business to your candidates. So on that note about approaches to your interviews and things like that, something that we need to make sure we remember is that not everybody has the same needs when it comes to preparation during an interview. Make sure you check in advance. There could be some reasonable adjustments that will make this far easier for them. And the fact that you're investing your time to make sure you ask those things, it's a big positive for candidates. They feel like you are interested in them. So with that in mind, just take that little bit of extra time as well for things like connection issues. If you live in a rural area or you live in a place that doesn't have strong broadband, there could be connection problems. It could cause issues during the interview. Let's make sure we're baking that time in. Let's not assume that everybody has the super fast broadband that you find in certain cities and things like that. It's something that you'll reap the benefits of later on. But also just make sure you involve your staff, the existing team. Get them to help when reviewing CVs. I've mentioned that earlier. You can get them to help when it's things like technical assessments. If the technical assessment is in an area that they've got expertise or in an area they've got of interest, they will want to be involved. Get them leading interviews as well. If they're involved in the hire, they will want that hire to succeed. They'll take pride in that person's success, and when they do come on board, they'll want to help them succeed. Creating that team ethos, working together, working closely, making sure that building a team is genuinely a team activity, including those different experiences and approaches. It's invaluable when you're trying to do these. So the third part of this for me is your practice community. So by that, what I mean is people who are in your common discipline. So for example, QA or back-end development, front-end development, just to generalize in terms of the technical side of things. So there's research that shows that organizations that manage to tap into the full talents of their staff can create what's known as a virtuous cycle of value. So by ensuring that you've got a strong, inclusive community culture, you're likely to produce better work, you're likely to produce things to a higher standard. The pandemic's led to us having some quite disparately distributed teams. There's very few people in the same locale, and this puts an even bigger importance on having a one-team culture. You need to be working together, and you need to have that drive to work together. So to use some examples from what we do in my team, we hold a daily catch-up, which isn't mandatory. It takes place immediately after lunch, so it's a bit of a circuit breaker through the day. It gives people a little bit of social interaction before they have to get their head into something in the afternoon. But the other thing for me is there's lots of people working on lots of different projects, and day to day, you're not seeing each other in the office. There needs to be that touch point that's a bit more social to build relationships, to build trust between each other. So it's not strictly a work conversation. There's no agenda. You might talk about some issues you're having on a project. It might be movies, it might be music. A lot of my guys like to talk about games, whether it's board games, computer games. They'll debate serious topics like the benefits of exercise or mental health, or whether Sam can legitimately describe his cats as kids. Genuine topic of conversation that happens every so often. Sometimes if there's been a bit of a lull, we will nominate a topic of conversation beforehand. So what's the worst ever dining experience you've had? Movies that everyone loves and you can't stand, or the dicey territory of unpopular opinions? We look to drive these things forward so that people can get fully engaged in it. But it allows people to become comfortable with each other. Being comfortable in each other's presence when you then have to talk about initiatives and drive things forward in your community, it's so much easier. You can understand where you can understand where each other are coming from, and it's less of a daunting experience to speak to somebody, because don't underestimate how daunting it can be to just have a conversation sometimes. So the next level of interactions we've got is that we hold sort of smaller, almost community within sub-community sort of weekly team meetings. So this will be where we'll discuss more project and client specific things. We'll share new work that could be of interest, and then there'll be within the smaller group, it's familiar subject matter. So you're going to be more, theoretically, people are going to be more comfortable with the topics under discussion, and they're more likely to contribute. And if you tie that in with the sort of more social element that you have in the other, hopefully they will be familiar with each other and comfortable within those conversations. And that should reduce some anxiety and hopefully increase their confidence when it comes to contributing to these. And then the other layer we've got is we hold sort of, it's kind of like a monthly town hall. It's a whole department meeting. There's an operational update from myself, what's going on in the broader business, make sure that people understand what's going on, where decisions are being made, how things are going to be progressing. Then the leads from either area will, from the different areas, will give an update. So what's going on in retained clients, what's going on in projects, and we can then have exposure to what's going on there. And then what we try and do is we try and carve out the last half an hour so that somebody can present on a topic of their choosing. So this could be a new automation framework that they're trying out. It could be a test management suite, demo product that's been released as part of a delivery, looking at new accessibility tools. The list can go on, but we try and rotate that around the team so that everybody gets the opportunity to speak publicly. Again, the more people do this, it raises the confidence. You let them set the agenda there. You're giving them control over part of that meeting. It becomes their meeting. And then, they can opt out. It's not mandatory. I'm not going to force people to do it, but what we try and do is we try and get people to nominate who takes the next attempt. So for me, it's a key thing. You've got to encourage people to develop new skills, share the learning with the community. Your members need to have autonomy and accountability, but that will instill an element of personal investment. And as we've sort of been talking about earlier on, if people have that personal investment and you invest in them, they are going to push things forward. So out with those groups, mentorship is a fantastic way to invest in people, and it's a two-way personal development. So mentorship being the relationship formed between the mentor and the mentee. The mentor provides guidance and shares knowledge with the mentee in order to improve their skills and their confidence. Just knowing that you've got that safety net of somebody to talk to can be massive for somebody who's involved in mentoring. But the mentor can also develop leadership skills, a sense of satisfaction in seeing their mentee grow. They could help help them understand how things go and have that empathy. So both sides of this relationship should build confidence and hopefully empower people to speak more freely. We've got to make sure, though, that we do admit our limitations and create partnerships that will enable that personal and professional growth. If you don't make sure those things hang together, then we have a problem. So the final of our trinity is your project team. So what do I mean by a project team? So in this instance, I'm more discussing things that are like a cross-discipline delivery team. So I work within a digital agency. We work with a variety of different clients with various technical needs, and that comes with varying priorities and often constraints. You have to work within parameters. So a level of pragmatism needs to be there. It'll probably come as no surprise. We were talking about shift left earlier. Within an agile delivery, I'm a big advocate for it. I think that it brings, from a selfish perspective, it brings my team to the table earlier, but it then brings everybody else to the table, and we can learn more together and we can try and collaborate better. So I mentioned it earlier, an uninformed perspective can often shed light on certain aspects that might be overlooked by someone who specializes in the area. Don't get me wrong, specialists are specialists for a reason, but with just one voice, that's not collaboration. So in the line management section, we've spoken about building trust and confidence for people to be honest in a one-to-one setting. Then we talked about moving into practice communities where we're looking to build that safe space, but you've got more people within your professional interests. But now we're in a one-to-many setting, and it's a cross-functional discussion. For some people, this will be out with their comfort zone, and we need to foster understanding and relationships quickly while still being effective. So how do we do this? So let's look at some of the ceremonies within Agile that we can try and leverage to do this. So we'll start with sprint planning. The whole team should be represented at sprint planning. I know that sounds obvious, but it's not always the case. Engage each section for their opinions, even if it's just to validate they agree with what's being proposed. Look at how you estimate as well. Have you considered potentially gamifying it? Having to commit to a number and say it out loud can be really quite daunting for people. And what you might want to try are things like planning poker. It can be really helpful in keeping people engaged because people are waiting to see, there's a bit of anticipation, but it also helps try and reduce a little bit of social anxiety around estimates. Some people fear, as I said there, people fear to put out there exactly what they think verbally. If you get them to put it on a card and do it. So for those of you who don't know what planning poker is, to start a planning session, traditionally a product owner will read out the user story and describe the feature for the people who are estimating. In a traditional game, you'll have cards, but with the pandemic, well, certainly X's anyway, we use an online version of it we've built ourselves. And with that, you use certain values to determine what it is. So everybody will then put in their estimate, and from there, we then all turn the cards over at the same time. We need to look at asking questions and making sure things have been fully discussed before we put those estimates out there. But once they've estimated it, we talk to the people who are high and low. Why do we think that this is going to take that amount of time? Why do you not think? And then what we do is once we've had that open discussion, we can then try again. And then what we do is we try and work until we've got a general consensus on there, until the estimates are there. Now, we're not looking to create confrontation. We're looking to create dialogue. We're looking to create understanding. And that's how we then try and get that consensus. And as I said earlier, there will need to be a level of pragmatism, but if we've had the discussion, we've been heard, and we understand the direction and why the decision is being made, it's far better than finding out about it retrospectively. Another thing that is very useful are design reviews. So traditionally, designs will be signed off within the design team and with the product team, and then they'll get submitted to clients. I feel like engineering, QA, every part of the team should be involved in that review. We can provide insights and gain insights. It can fuel technical decisions as well. And if we flag issues earlier, then it costs less to fix. It also helps when you're in QA for what's known as static testing. So picking up on potential issues before they happen. It'll just save a lot of pain. And also designers are fantastic at designing what they do. Their interpretation of requirements may be different to product's interpretations may be different to development to QA. You get the point. Everybody could have a different viewpoint on it, and it's about understanding and making sure that we have a rounded understanding of these things. The next thing I like to look at is things like personas. So personas are, again, something that quite often will get put together for UX, will get put together for design, and they're brilliant. They help create a pair of shoes for the team to wear, but they don't often get passed on to the rest of the team. So they will fuel design decisions and they might fuel product decisions, but they could also fuel technical decisions. They can fuel testing decisions. Creating empathy is a massive part of creating inclusive products. And if you don't understand your end user, how can you make something accessible? So if you give them a face, a name, a backstory, people will empathize with them. And there's also quite often a focus on visible disabilities. These can be, the non-visible ones can be included within your range. But for me, what happens is it gives the entire team an anchor point and a sort of single, to help them fuel their decisions and fuel discussions. We've got acceptance criteria sessions. So AC sessions for short. This is where you define what you're going to create. What goes into your acceptance criteria will affect delivery. And this should be a collaborative discussion. So we've talked about empowering people to speak and going through all these different things. If you can layer these, when you come to these AC sessions, then people should be more engaged, because the reality is you should be engaged. It's going to impact your work directly. In the past, I've used certain techniques which are sort of like a combination of risk storming and the sort of planning poker we were talking about earlier. It makes it more interactive. So you can use tools like Miro, so that location's not a factor, but you can place something in the middle that is your story. Ask each area to identify what they think is the key criteria for the story. Ask each area to then identify from the broader list where they think it is, and then you can vote for things. So you can vote on what you think are the most important things, and that should then stimulate conversation. And then again, much like the planning poker, just repeat it until you've got a bit of a consensus, or as a team, you understand the direction of travel. Stand-ups. So these realistically are standard across the team. They're a short meeting, provide your update for the previous day, plans for the days ahead. One thing that we do internally here that I think is really effective is actually rotating the responsibility for who runs the stand-up. I think that provides people with the responsibility. It means that, let's be honest, if you're listening to the same person running the same meeting and you're on day 100, you might get a little bit disinterested. So rotating that round, and then the person who leads the stand-up gets to nominate the next person. They get to own the next direction that this goes in. And I think that, again, it's a bit of empowerment. It's a small thing. It's a very small thing, but it helps. Just the last couple on here, we've got functional reviews. So it's a very similar situation to design reviews, only we flip the roles. Technology is going to walk through their proposal or their solution, and then design, product, QA, etc. We can then discuss whether it matches our interpretations of the requirements. But again, it should be a collaborative discussion, and we should be open to feedback. Retrospectives are the final one there, and for me, this is a key one. So it's key to sharing our successes. We praise the team and the individuals where appropriate, but we also need to share the lessons learned. Not everything will go well, and this can be a daunting experience, again, for those who are uncomfortable giving feedback. There are many tools there that can take the pressure off. We mentioned Miro earlier. They have a number of different boards you can use that make it easy to manage, but make sure that people are engaging in these. And as I say, if you empower people and make sure that they have that equity of voice, then when it comes to these retrospectives, it should be a less daunting experience. You got to make sure that you agree on actions and allocate an owner, though. Sometimes you'll see a retro happen, and then very little will happen on the back of it. Continue to make the same mistakes. If somebody raises an improvement, it's because they believe that that improvement is needed, and it's meaningless if we don't investigate it. So we need to show that we are investigating, evaluating, and then taking any remedial action we need to take. Seeing these in action will empower people to speak, because if they can see that what they've said is making a difference, then they're 100% going to try again, and also other people will then see that it's working. I don't think people are I think people sometimes underestimate how much of a confidence boost that you can see if what you do makes a difference. So, in summary, the takeaways that I feel are important here is understand your audience, whether it be in a team setting, whether it be in a one-to-one setting, a community setting, a project setting, a recruitment setting, whatever it is, understand who you're talking to. Do your research, look into different things, and approach it accordingly. Make sure you're providing a comparable or a consistent experience. Now, as I said earlier, everything's subjective. You do need to take different approaches for different people. but we should be consistent with it. If you show favoritism, people will get disinterested in it. They won't see it as an equitable thing. So make sure you're being consistent. Create opportunities. This isn't always about people taking part under duress. Well, I say it's never about that. Let's be clear. But what I'm more meaning is that we should be making sure that the opportunity is there. You cannot lead a horse. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink, as the old phrase goes. Take actions. If something needs to be done, let's step forward. We need to be collaborative with that. I don't mean just go off and just take decisions and it happens. Sometimes we need to be decisive, but get the right people in the room and make sure that we're taking the appropriate actions. Give control. Let people drive things for themselves. We can be there to provide people with steer, but the reality is we should be empowering them. We want them to be invested. We want them to step up. And as I said earlier, the most important thing, if you take one thing away from this talk, it's this: create a sense of belonging. If you create a sense of belonging, people will want to be there. People will want to do their best. They will not want to let people down. They will want to give you everything they can and make it the best it can be. Never underestimate the sense of belonging. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Fantastic talk, Paul. Thank you so much. And I can't emphasize how important it is to put people with disabilities in the driving seat. I loved also your takeaways, where I can see a little hint at the inclusive design principles and applying them to managing teams and diverse teams. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Kevin, over to you. Do we have any questions?
Hi, yeah, and thanks, Paul. That was really, really good. And also, having worked with you, I know that that's principles which you live by yourself. So it's lovely to see you sharing them for others. One question I do have is that it's come through. Many jobs boards and recruitment platforms have poor accessibility. So what can we do to build more inclusive teams if people are blocked from applying to begin with?
So that is an excellent question. And for me, what we need to be doing is we need to be, as part of the recruitment process, is reviewing where we post things. If we post things, firstly, on things being inaccessible, we need to assess the platforms that we're using. Do they meet the needs that we have? Do they meet the needs of the people we're looking to reach? We also need to make sure that we're using a variety of different platforms. If you post things only in one place, you're going to narrow your audience. So make sure you're using a broad amount of platforms, and also assess what you've got there. If it's not going to work and it's not going to allow people to get there, use a different platform. People will react to that if the numbers of people using them drop off.
Amazing, thank you so much, Paul. I think Henny's also got a question for you, so I'll hand back over to her.
Yeah, we've got time for a very, very quick one, but I wondered if you've clearly got a lot of experience here, and if you had any practical examples of where you have had to adapt your process or adapt your thinking or your strategy to accommodate somebody with a disability within your team in a way that you really hadn't anticipated. I'm thinking, for example, I worked with a colleague who was blind, but her eyesight would change sort of every 6 months to a year. So we'd have to rethink the types of tasks that she would do. She was an accessibility tester. So if you've got any examples, I would be interested to hear.
Sure. So in pre-pandemic days, so when working from home was less of a normal thing, I had a colleague that suffered really badly with anxiety. Suffered really badly with there was an element of depression that came with it, but where they would struggle to leave the house some mornings. They, facing getting on a bus and coming to the office would affect them physically, mentally. It was a very massive struggle. And it was about managing you had to be sort of a bit on your toes and nimble with that, you know. We didn't really have much of a working from home culture at that time. We also didn't have much of a working flexibly culture at that time. So what I had to do was work with them to come up with a way of working that would enable them to still feel productive and feel like they were creating value. And a big part of that was that creating that value then boosted their confidence, which then lowered their anxiety. So for me, it was about making sure that we had the right mechanisms in place to help them still do their job, but without putting the pressure on them and saying, look, do you know what, if you need to take a couple of hours, go and take a couple of hours. We can work through this. We can have chats. And then just making sure you're available for those people as well. Because sometimes you do need to change up your approach. You do need to change up what you're doing. And I say in that instance, it wasn't something that was visible to the rest of the business. So you also have to then deal with the privacy issue of that. So you have to be discreet while also putting these things together. So yeah, that would be one example that jumps out to me.
That's great, thank you. And it goes back to your point about awe and what else, and giving people the space to talk about what they might need. Thank you very much, and thank you, Kevin, as well. We're now past the halfway point of ID24, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. We've got loads more talks to come. If you like this session, then please do hit the YouTube like button, and don't forget you can subscribe to the youtube.com/inclusive design 24 YouTube channel to keep you in the loop of future events, and also catch up with any talks you might have missed this year or from previous years. As a reminder, the ID24 community is a respectful one, and we have a code of conduct on our website, Inclusive Design 24. And also a big thank you to our supporters who've made this possible today: Intopia, Fable, TPGI Arc, Adobe, Tactrological, Intuit, InfoAxia, Centre for Inclusive Design, Web Directions, AAA, Adrian Roselli LLC, and Can Access. We are really lucky to have them. We'll be back at the top of the hour in roughly 7 minutes with our next talk. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.